So, Ravin, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Who do you work for?
Sure. Yeah. So Ravin Soni, VP of Engineering at Curative. Not a well-known name. We're a fairly new company. We're actually a health insurance startup. And we've been doing this for, maybe less than 3 years at this point. So fairly new to a pretty big and wide open space. But yeah, we're trying to reimagine healthcare.
Brilliant. And I think healthcare definitely needs that help, because, we've always had that experience, what have you. So in terms of your journey then, Ravin, I'm kind of curious as to how, I was kind of checking you out on LinkedIn as you do, okay? So what's your journey been like? What are the key points in your path to CTO position?
Yeah. So I got my first start in leadership, maybe 2011, that time frame. Never thought I'd get into leadership, just kind of happened. Joined a company called Cornerstone On Demand. They are in the HR tech space. They are one of the leading players in learning management systems. They do performance management, recruiting, kind of the entire experience of managing employees. And so I joined prior to the company launching a recruiting product. And so I was, assigned to be the first engineer on that product. And I think many people get their start this way. They're kind of just the default leader. And so interesting story. Started working on that product. I think we had maybe 3 engineers with me at the time. And little did I know, but our company, which had just recently gone public, I think it was March of 2011 in that time frame. And so we were starting to work on this brand new recruiting product. And maybe October, November, that time frame, 2011, I got called into the CEO's office with the CTO. And they let me know that they had made some promises to Wall Street that we would have this product launched. I think it was in March of 2012. And so I had about 4 months before that deadline. And we had just started. And I was like, well, I have like a 3-person team and you're expecting to build this whole new suite of products in 4 months. And so, it was kind of this fire drill, if you will, to try and build this out. I'm a brand new manager, still learning the ropes. And, they cobbled together a bunch of resources from across the organization, said, hey, they're all on your team for the next 4 months, go build it. And so it was my ultimate trial by fire. I had to really learn a lot about engineering, management, leadership on the fly. And I would say it was a terrifying and stressful time. Almost every day, some executive would stop by my desk and be like, how are we doing? We're going to make the date. And definitely made my fair share of mistakes, but worked. And that was the most important thing to me is, I just got a crash course in being a leader. And long story short, we made our deadline. We released a product maybe a couple weeks before the deadline, showcased it at an HR tech conference, and actually won an award for innovation. And so, overall, it gets my career. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That's a really lovely story. I'm always kind of curious as to when we have these kind of pressure. Obviously, there's too much pressure, and then there's just the right amount of pressure. But that kind of invigorates the space to create innovation and progress and what have you. I think there's a law called Parkinson's law. We all consume the time allocated to something by the time that's allocated to it, and we just kind of use it. Do you think that pressure was what kind of forced the innovation and excellent product delivery out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there was no way we were going to get it done without that pressure. Like, it was just an overwhelming amount of work, and you had to really prioritize ruthlessly, like what is truly important. And something that I learned during that process of, hey, what can we just toss to the side because it's not going to matter in the long run versus like what is absolutely essential? What do we have to deliver? And, I think with a new product launch like this, a lot of the decisions are made for you because you're just building out the basics. And so we were very much in that position of like, you just don't have a product unless you build X, Y, and Z. And so a lot of it was just checking off the boxes and just making sure that you had enough of a product that you could sell. Well, yeah, certain things that like, all right, the reality of all software is there's always shortcuts you have to take. And we had to make, really important decisions about which shortcuts we had to take in order to meet that deadline. I think, some of them we had to unwind a few months after once we realized, okay, this is maybe not the right shortcut to take, but you can't go back and change time. And other things, worked out really well and, are still in place, 12, 13 years later.
Fantastic. That's really good. I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself during this pressurizing time? Because a lot of people think that tech leadership is kind of like, it's romanticized and you're kind of like having conversations and it, tapping. I mean, what did you learn about yourself under that pressure?
Yeah, I surprisingly I handled the situation fairly well. And I think that was a good sign that maybe I could do this. And I was made for this type of a role. And then just the people aspect of it, just, going from me working with the same 2-3 people every day to suddenly having 15 people, all with different backgrounds, people that I just didn't really work with on a day-to-day basis. And now I had to establish relationships quickly. And so that was just a great learning experience for me and just like understanding like, what does this person like to do and what motivates that person and what skill sets can they bring to this project? And I definitely made some assumptions about some people and what they would want to work on, and then found out later on that actually this is not something that they're all that interested in doing. And so I had to course correct and put them on things that would be more motivating. And obviously, we're always looking for things as leaders that motivates our teams, because that's how you get people that really engaged and you get the best output out of them. But I definitely learned not to assume certain things. And, just one of the things that I always do when it comes to motivating, or when it comes to motivation, is just ask people like what motivates them. Yeah. Get the straight answer. It's not rocket science. It's the rocket science.
Yes.
Ask them and you will get an answer.
Absolutely. I think we do make that mistake. I love this topic of assumptions. It actually is quite a big, I work with a lot of leaders and making assumptions is, we want to make it easy. The brain just wants to create a shortcut and makes up a story and runs with it. But there's something around actually throwing a question to the space and getting people to articulate it, which is really quite invigorating for the social system, the relationships as well. People get to be seen, they feel like they're being heard, etc., etc. So I'm totally with you on that one, to communicate our mission.
Yeah, obviously I worked on a recruiting product for about a decade at Cornerstone. I also ran engineering recruiting for most of that time that I was there. And so I can't tell you how many interviews I've done. And, when it comes to interviewing managers, I always ask that question. It's like, how do you motivate your team? And it's rare that I get anybody who just doesn't jump to assumptions and say, here's how you motivate a team. Like, not many stop to say, well, I got to find out about the team. I got to ask them what motivates them. Like, that just rarely ever comes up as an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great lesson for our kind of tech leader audience listening out there, and aspiring tech leaders as well. Just ask the system. The system will tell you. The system wants to speak. Let it speak. Put it out there. And as I say, once you actually do open up the space with this conversation, it changes the conversation. It just changes the landscape of what we're talking about as well. There was a TEDx talk that I was talking about where, in a way, it's kind of like the elephant in the room. There's these elephants in the room. And once you get the elephant in the room and everybody knows there's an elephant in the room, we're talking about the elephant in the room, it changes that whole conversation and it opens up this space. So yeah, great share there. I just want to, while we're still on your leadership, the transition of, you mentioned that, you're quite surprised at how well you transitioned. What was your biggest surprise and biggest as you made this transition from being a techie, I can imagine you're proper into your tech,
Yes.
and then you kind of jumped over there. What was your biggest surprise transitioning?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was a total surprise in that people tell you when you get into leadership and the more leadership you do, you are going to be a little bit disconnected from like the hardcore techie things. But that's just something you don't internalize. Like you always just assume that, okay, it doesn't matter. Like I'm always a techie at heart. I'm always going to be like knee deep in understanding the latest and greatest. And then you actually get into the job and then you get deeper and deeper into the leadership and you quickly realize that something's got to give. Like either you're going to be really, really great at being a leader or you're always going to be like stuck in this IC mentality. And giving that up is not easy to do. And, I've seen a lot of leaders or just engineers who are like, I want to be in leadership, and they can never get past that. And then they quickly realize, oh, maybe I don't want to be in leadership because I do just want to remain a hardcore techie. But in my case, I was okay with it. At some point, I realized, all right, in order for me to advance my career, I'm gonna have to focus on a different set of skills than the ones that got me here. And I just have to be okay with it. And so I did, let go more and more. And, as you grow, you get more and more teams and more of those responsibilities. You're just going to be more, disconnected. And you try as hard as you can to stay connected, but it just becomes impossible.
Yes, absolutely. I know this isn't about me, but I want to confess, when I was an software engineer, I remember the very last bit of code I checked in and pushed the keyboard away. So it was a baptism of fire almost. And everybody looked at me and no. And I've never been back. I do miss it, to be honest. There's always this kind of like calling back, the code whispers to me, and I look at other people's code and I think, I wouldn't mind doing that. But it's a bit of a heartbreaker to kind of disconnect from this art that we've been developing for so long, and it is an art, so that's good. So I want to now talk about the company that you're working for, Curative. So what is the problem that it's solving in the market, Ravin?
Yeah, so I think this is probably something that you get as close to universal agreement on. People don't love health insurance in this country. It's a big point of frustration. It's not very efficient. And, I think the true goal of health insurance should be to try and advance health, like just overall health in this country. And that's clearly not what's happening. And so to me, and I think most Americans, the model is just broken. And, what you see is people are just not focused on healthcare outcomes, which means that people get sicker. And the way health insurance companies deal with that is they just keep raising prices because they have to pay more for sicker people, instead of focusing on the actual problem of, hey, let's just try and keep people as healthy as possible, and do what the actual point of health insurance is, which is like the catastrophic things. And so Curative is really trying to focus on that preventative care, go to the doctor every year, that focus. And so we do that in a couple of interesting ways. So first, one of the key things that prevents people from going to see their doctor every year, or, if you're sick, oftentimes you'd be like, is it worth it to go see the doctor? I got to pay like $50 for my copay. And then, there's this whole deductible thing, which, I maybe don't even understand. And even after that, I might get a surprise bill. And so that just deters people. And, that visit that would have been maybe $120, $150 to see your PCP and would have solved your problem doesn't happen. And you get sicker and sicker and sicker. And then maybe a week later, you're going to the ER. And now that visit is $1,500 instead of $150, right? And then, if it really gets bad, then you get admitted. And at that point, you're talking thousands of dollars a night. Maybe we've seen cases of like 25 grand a night. And so in many cases, some of the stuff could have been avoided. And so one of our core tenets is we want to eliminate that financial fear. And the way you do that is just to make your plan as transparent as possible. And so what Curative does is we offer zero copay, zero deductible, $0 for prescription drugs. And so obviously there's some rules around that, like it has to be a network to get the zeros. And of course, for the prescription drugs, it has to be on our formulary. But as long as you see a doctor that's in our network and you follow our formulary, there's nothing out of pocket for you. And so that is truly like groundbreaking in the industry. Like nothing like that really exists out there for like PPO plans. However, that is just one part of the plan. Then there's the actual preventative care part of it. And so what we ask of all of our members is, we've got this great financial incentive, the zeros, but in order to do that, you have to do what we call a baseline visit. And that's an annual visit you have with one of our care navigators. And the purpose of that visit is just to make sure that you understand how to maximize your plan and understand like how to really use it. And then it's also a quick check-in with one of our clinicians. And that allows us to just create that sort of a relationship with our member, identify if there's any risk that we have to work with that member, like make sure that they can get the appropriate care. But enough people are just not seeing the doctor on a year-to-year basis that would allow them to catch stuff early. And so this allows us that little window to just help people get and direct the appropriate care. Like this is not a replacement for a PCP, but we can help people get to where they need to go if they do have some health complications. And so every member has within the first 4 months of starting the plan to do this visit. And we have a crazy high rate of people obviously avoiding that, because if you don't do the visit, then you're on a standard high deductible plan. And so you've got a very large incentive to do the baseline visit. And so our adherence is extremely high. And so that has helped us a lot in terms of just creating a plan that our members really like. We have some crazy high NPS scores. I believe our latest NPS score is like a 79 with our members.
What does that mean?
Net Promoter Score.
Okay, right. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So with that, with extremely high, like I think all the other companies are in the negative, health insurance companies. And so that was kind of the bet that the company was placing, right? We're going to eliminate the upfront costs and we're going to focus on really making sure you go see the doctor, identifying that risks, getting out in front of it, and let's see how it works. And I think so far the signs are really encouraging. Like we're doing a really, really fantastic job of keeping people out of the hospital. Yeah. And like our metrics on that are incredible, like so much better than the rest of the industry. And so I think that's just a testament to this plan working and, just the common sense of like focusing on preventative care does pay off.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Common sense. It's anything but common sometimes. It's a bit of a funny thing, and it's great. It sounds like a very noble cause. But the question I had here is that is tech actually making the system of health in the US better? Because I do quite a lot of reading. I'm quite well read. I tend to kind of look into these things, and we kind of compare it to the European model, the UK model, whatever. Is tech actually helping there? Is it helping the system repair itself?
Ooh, that's a great question. There's definitely a lot of value to tech in healthcare. I think it goes without saying that health tech is a little bit behind something like, social media companies or financial companies, consumer internet. a lot of legacy technologies still play a huge role, unfortunately, in healthcare. It's funny. So my current job and then my previous job, I worked at Elation Health, which is an EHR company. And I was shocked to find out how much communication happens through fax. Like, I was like, fax is still a thing? But the amount of faxes that we were processing at Elation was just insane. I want to say that was maybe our most important or biggest vendor that we had to deal with because of just the volume. And so we see the same things. Like, you'd be surprised how many claims get faxed to us, even though there's just so many tools out there to do electronic submission. It's still a really, really big, unfortunate thing that people do.
I'll say it's surprising, actually.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the U.S. healthcare technology space is we don't have like a unified medical record system. I think in England, you've got that. And that definitely makes things easier. But for us, we don't have that, right? Like, when we get a new member, it's not like we've got their full medical history. There are systems out there that try and cobble it together, but there's just so many systems. And while there are these networks that will try and consolidate and patch together, like, you can't guarantee it's all going to be there. And so there's definitely holes. And there's definitely companies that just aren't sharing all that much.
No. I think it's kind of common in lots of industries. The data's there, but it's locked away behind closed doors, or it's owned by somebody, or there's some agreement, and it's just like, kind of thing. And I, in fact, had a conversation with the highway agency here, and there was a similar thing there. The data's there, just not available, So yeah, I think that's another kind of lesson for tech leaders and businesses, leaders of businesses, to make sure that when these contracts are put in place, the data is flowing, so that, obviously make it safe and usable, but it is frustrating.
Well, sometimes the data truly isn't there. Like, you'd be surprised. There's still a decent amount of like small clinics and practices who are still using paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not fully digitized. And so, that was one of the interesting things at Elation. Like, one of our biggest competitors was paper. And, a lot of clinics were still doing that. So, so it just goes to show how far we have to go in getting really clean data.
I guess it's something around making it frictionless, because there's nothing like picking up a piece of paper and scribbling on it. In the short term, it does the job, but I guess the tech kind of adds a little bit more complexity to it. I can't think of any particular use cases right now, but I guess that's the art of creating the tech that just makes it so seamless. Like, why wouldn't you do it that way? Just make it frictionless.
That's something that we spend a lot of time doing at Curative, is just understanding how do we make the member experience be as frictionless as possible. Same thing at Elation, though. A lot of effort just went into that UX. It's like, okay, how do we decrease the burden on physicians when they're inputting their notes or whatever action they're taking, ordering a prescription? If that's a lot of clicks, if that's a lot of typing, it slows them down. And in many cases, you've got back-to-back appointments. And so if you have to sit there and like type out things and you're doing a lot of clicks, you're just not going to do it. And so what we see with a lot of physicians is they wait till the end of the day. And so they've worked a full, 8-9 hours of just seeing patients. And then they've got all this administrative work to do. And they're spending hours after the fact just documenting and putting in orders and things like that. And so that's where the user experience is just huge.
So this kind of makes me pounce now on a topic that I've been itching to bring into the space, which is AI and machine learning. I can see that being a great avenue here, almost listening in and kind of making the notes and doing your admin for you, Is that something that you're doing? I guess this is on your kind of roadmaps. I'm making an assumption here.
Oh, I mean, it's like what project doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, on the roadmap, right? And so a lot of the operational things that we try to address at Curative, oftentimes one of the first questions is this an AI solution? In many cases, if you're just working on the basics and you don't have anything in place, you shouldn't just jump to AI. There's probably a more deterministic way that will get you much more reliable answers. But for some other things, like, if you have a bunch of faxes that are sent to you and they're not exactly categorized appropriately, that's a really good use for AI, right? Like the AI tools can OCR, they can make meaning out of it, and they can tell you, hey, this is a claim, this is an appeal, and all those different types of documents that we get. Right now, people have to look at them and determine, okay, what is this? And how do I input this into our claim system? And so that's a really good use of AI, where it can basically do that categorization for you, can spit out the data model from the documents that we get. So yeah, there's just a ton of opportunities there. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is pretty interesting to us is nowadays when people get sick, the first place they typically go is to an LLM, right? They go to ChatGPT and they're like, oh, my knee hurt. What should I do? And the more and more you see of that, it makes you wonder, like, is there an opportunity for us to maybe direct our members better, where if they're already asking an LLM, if you can plug into that experience, you can actually get them to the right place sooner rather than later. And that's something that we are exploring maybe down the line.
Yeah, I love that. I as I say, I use it for lots of things. I've got an element of questioning there, just in case it's not quite the right thing, but it is amazing what it does. Some of the information it gives. If anything, it just shines a light of awareness on certain topics and certain things that you might want to know more about. But AI. I'm really excited about what it. I can't help feeling that, as I think you kind of touched on it as well, Ravin. There's sometimes it's over-egged. Everybody's trying to shoehorn everything into the kind of AI paradigm. But I think we're learning. I think we're getting a bit more. Actually, as a CTO, do you get a lot of pressure to start, throwing in AI? Because there's almost like a wave. I don't know if you've ever been in a crowd where the kind of crowd just swarms in one direction. You're going to get dragged along with it. Is that happening for you in your space?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. Yeah. Again, it's like the first thing that comes to everyone's mind. Like, is this an AI project? And can AI solve this? Can AI speed up the process of building this out? And so, yeah, I think it's without a doubt, like almost everything that we do these days, there's an aspect of AI that comes into play.
Yeah. And I guess it's trying to find that balance, what's practical, what's pragmatic. And I can imagine that's a tough time to be saying, no, we're not going to do AI on that. What do you mean? Kind of thing. It's a very difficult one. I've got a question here around, I just want to go, stick on your leadership for a bit, and also choosing the right team, because leaders in this day and age aren't just about their leadership. It's about the team that they create around them. What's your tips around that to create the best teams? And what are the mistakes that you've made that you'd like to kind of share here, if you want to confess them, on your journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just in general, what I've always focused on is like truly building a good team, right? You can look at individuals and say, hey, this is the best engineer out there, but there's this aspect of attitude and how good of a teammate that they're going to be that plays a major role in how successful they're going to be at your company. And so I always look at those aspects just as importantly as just the hard skills. One of the things that I've always believed in when building a team is when you get people who understand how to collaborate, they're almost always really good team members, and they're people that you like to work with. And people who like their coworkers tend to like their jobs. And so, in my own selfish needs, building a team that's going to be durable and last and not have, constant turnover is very important. There's a lot of productivity to be gained by having a team that's been in place for a while. Like losing a person, having to train them, getting that institutional knowledge, that domain knowledge is a huge drag on productivity. And so the longer you can keep people in place and keep them happy, the better off you'll be in the long run and better off for your productivity. And so I've always just believed in hire people that you think are going to be good teammates, because at the end of the day, an individual can only do so much. A team can do exponentially more. And so focusing on the team versus the individual is just really important and much more important for productivity.
So how do you eke that out? What's the signals in the noise to know that somebody's going to be a good teammate?
I think people definitely have their tells, right? When you talk about the projects that they've worked on, oftentimes the language that they use to describe their role in those projects tells you a lot, right? If it's a lot of I's and there's, people, I've had a fair share of people during their interview that blame a lot in their interviews, which is always a bit of a red flag, versus others who talk about what they did as a team and how well they work together with others, and what they accomplished together. And so, yeah, there aren't direct questions that you necessarily can ask about it, but you can definitely get the signs from the type of questions that you ask. And so ask questions about projects that they've worked on that they had to work with others on. And, that tends to tell you a lot about how well they're going to be as a team.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it kind of coming back to the AI question, maybe AI can listen and pick up some of these tales, some of the language, very negative, very kind of like this, just to summarize it and going, maybe the interviewees could have some AI running thing. Oh, you might want to shut up on that one and direct your kind of statements in this direction. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I always find it interesting. Sometimes people have just got a good energy about them, but there's no science behind that. It's just that you just get a feeling. There's some intuition there. Yes. And then hopefully your intuition is pointing in the right direction.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think some of it is practice, right? Interviewing is a skill like any other. The more you do it, the more practice you have at it, the better you get at it, the more you can pick up on those signs. And it does at some point become almost instinctual.
One of the things, just as a share that I've seen from various leaders, is that they put the expectations out there very early on. Sometimes they're quite brutal. This is the expectation we have as a team, as a leader. This is what I expect. And then watch to see how the feedback, the micro gestures, as you described, how do they respond to that? Do they kind of fluff it? Do they align with it? Do they get excited about it? Or what have you? So, I think sometimes you can kind of prod them in conversational ways to kind of see, what does that work? I had one interviewee, this is a long time ago when I was an electronic engineer, and everything I said, they didn't believe me. They just questioned it. They went, I don't believe that. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't? It's my truth, and the way I responded was a tell to them as to, was it really true, kind of thing. I'm not sure if I advised that one, but it was funny at the time.
No, when you do enough interviews, you always have your moments where you're like, oh, wow. I remember I did an interview of an engineer, as a former Microsoft engineer, and we were doing some technical questions. And I asked a question and I thought that they'd answered it incorrectly. And then they turn around and they're like, actually, you're wrong. And I'm like, how do you know that? Why are you saying that I'm wrong? And the guy said, well, I worked on that feature when I was at Microsoft. So I can definitely tell you,
Wow.
you're wrong.
Yeah. And that's a really good tell as well, for somebody to be able to bring forth a truth that they have, and not to be fearful. I mean, that's a sign of a character as well, which is a really beautiful one. It's one I learned later on in life. I wish I'd have used it earlier, because I think, as part of team members, we have to bring what we see, our perspective, because just because somebody else thinks it's wrong doesn't mean that we're wrong. It's just we're offering it as information, and we can become richer for it. Good. So as part of your journey, I'm kind of curious: has there been any particular things that have been instrumental in your journey? And so often we speak about books in this podcast, or were there any films? Were there any particular leaders that have been instrumental, that have really kind of charged and defined your leadership?
Most people have some role models or mentors that they learn from. And I definitely had a lot of great mentorship during my time at Cornerstone. I was there for 11 years. And so during that entire time, I had the same manager and his manager, the CTO. And so those were kind of the people that I looked up to, and got all my questions answered, and just was able to observe. And they were just fantastic at people management, organizational building, those types of things, which, I had the tech background, and so I didn't need much there. But what was new to me was all the other things, right? The expectations setting, and the relationship management, and dealing with difficult people, and then just the concept of how do you build an organization, and how do you evolve an organization as you grow. And so I had a great opportunity to just watch and learn from the people above me, and they were just fantastic mentors and role models. But also, I think two things that really meant a lot to me and benefited me a lot was they gave me challenges, sometimes difficult ones, and they just trusted that I could go off and do it. And that I really enjoyed. It made my job much more fulfilling, but it also helped me grow. And I think one of the most important things that my manager said to me was, if you want to advance in your career, you got to make sure that the people that are reporting up to you are growing, so that they can take some of your responsibilities as you take on bigger responsibilities. And that really resonated with me. And so that's something that I have always thought about and invested in. And I do the same thing with my direct report. Got to challenge them, give them things that maybe is going to make them a little bit uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, they're going to grow from it.
I think that's a really good point, Ravin, actually, to be intentional about creating the challenges to get people out of their comfort zone and growing in a particular direction that you see fitting for them, go beyond the business as usual, go beyond just delivering what we need to do, and getting really designed about that. Because, I think as human beings, we do thrive in that. I call it the comfortable discomfort, where we're not completely in the realm and kind of going nuts, but we are being stretched, and we're doing it with the curation and support of a leader that has kind of got a back. I mean, the leader's not doing it for us, but it's just the thought of the leader being there and challenging us to do it and see what you can do here. It's huge, to have that support there. So yeah, kudos to mentors and leaders out there that do that. And it's great to hear that you're doing that as well.
Yeah. One of the, I think, most important things that I learned from both sets of leaders was just the value of transparency. I watched them, and they'd give these large, and we'd have these large public town halls with the entire tech team, and I was always struck by just how much transparency our CTO would give the team. Sometimes like a surprising amount. And I'm like, whoa, saying that in front of the group. But I took a lot from that. And I think one of the most important things that I've done in terms of just building relationships, not just with the people that report to me, but also their teams as well, is just trying to be as transparent as possible. And I found that goes a long way in just building trust. Like I love to have, one-on-ones with individual engineers and just talk about the business and share things about the business, because they typically don't get that level of transparency and they're not hearing these details in the same way. And so I find the engineers get a lot out of it. But also it starts creating some of that business focus mentality of like, why is what I'm doing important? How does that fit into the broader business? What are the things that I should know? And what is important for me to focus on versus what is actually not that important, right? And that goes back to the whole understanding your priorities. And it's funny, one of the things that I constantly harp on with engineers on my team is I always talk about the business. Like, yes, you're primarily here because you love technology, but if you really want to be the most productive and most valuable engineers possible, you got to lean into the business and understand what is the business problems that you are trying to solve. And if you can do that well, you'll be way more productive and way more valuable than, someone who's just cranking out code.
I think, that's something I missed and learned later on. I think having a leader or a mentor in the space to get me thinking that way would have, hey, I could have been a CTO by now, if I'd have got that. Didn't quite happen, but hey, I'll get to interview great CTOs, so that's good. So I'm gonna offer you a wish, Ravin. Okay, I'm gonna offer you a wish from the tech genie. Okay, just imagine me coming out of some technical, thing, and I'm going to offer you a wish. What would you wish for your leadership, for your company, for your industry, even maybe?
Far and away, going back to a problem we spoke about earlier, the quality of data in healthcare. If I could solve that problem, oh my God, it would be fantastic. Like it's because so much of what we do is work around bad data, right? And so when you have to deal with data that's not clean, it just adds more and more complexity to the work you have to do. You have to build in so many more guardrails. And so something that should have been straightforward and easy now balloons into this much larger project because, you're spending, you're knocking out the 80% really fast. And then you're just iterating over and over again on the bad data. And that extends the timeline of your project. And so if we could have even something as, something you'd think is simple, like provider rosters, like getting good provider data. Oh my God. It's surprisingly difficult to get. Like the data is just constantly wrong. It's out of date. It's just, we get so many reports of, hey, this doctor no longer practices at this facility anymore, or this practice that you're showing at this address is actually moved. And there's just no good system to keep all that up to date. So those types of problems, like good provider data, good medical record data, right? Just having that all cleanly available would be awesome to have. Even standardization of types of data, like in many cases, we just get random files that are given to us. So we, Curative, as mentioned, health insurance company, we sell exclusively to employer-sponsored plans. And so the roster of members from that company who are going to sign up for our plan is given to us in some data format. And oftentimes it's not clean. And so the amount of engineering we've had to do to handle all the different data issues that we can anticipate. And of course, there's many that we don't anticipate. And once that data gets in your system, it creates a mess and you got to unwind it. And that just eats up a lot of time. It's bodies that now have to spend time cleaning up all this stuff. So yeah, if that genie came out, that would be the one thing
I'm working on it. I'm already on it. I've got it going on. But yeah, I totally get it. I think data is something that just create rabbit holes of effort, as you described beautifully there. And it's a shame, it's almost like when you start a job, if you're going to do it half-heartedly and you're just going to slap it around, it's going to come back to bite you, And data, even though data has no tangible kind of physical present, it has a bite to it, So let's make the world a better place by just tidying up the data and making it clean and understandable. So yeah, I'm going to work on that for you. I think that's a great wish. That's a great wish. I'm going to share again that I actually have a fear of large amounts of data. I don't know what that name is. I've worked on some big data projects and it frightened the life out of me. I got so stressed out. I'm definitely not a data scientist, but I think data can be presented in ways in which we can see it in enough ways to get the information that we need without having to go to drill down into, oh God, yeah. In fact, I'm starting to sweat just thinking about it. We'd have to figure out the name of fear of data. Probably somebody can share that there. So, Ravin, as we come to the final full stop of our time together, unfortunately, what's the final key takeaway that you'd like to leave for our audience as we part company? What's the gift that you'd like to offer for our tech leader audience?
That's a good question. I think maybe just some lessons learned that I wish I had known earlier. So I think first one, I already talked about, that transparency. This goes such a long way, and try and be as transparent as possible with your team, your organization. It will definitely pay off. Obviously, you have to understand what is confidential versus what isn't. But being transparent about the business just really goes a long way. And then if there's one thing I'd wish I learned sooner at Cornerstone when I was there, is just the value of asking, why are we doing this? I will be honest, initially, and I think even many years into my time there, I just didn't ask that enough. And oftentimes it's just, hey, let's just go do this. Let's go build this. This is the next project. And I just go build it. And, I had a fair amount of times where we'd invest 3 months, 6 months in this large scale project, and then come to find out that people don't really want it. Right? Or the way that we thought it should work is not what people really wanted. And so we had instances, we had I think a 6-month long investment in a project that ended up with 0 users.
It's eye-watering, isn't it? The amount, the effort, the time, it's eye-watering.
Yeah. And so later on, I just figured out, okay, this is just we're not approaching this in the right way. And we really have to start thinking hard about the true ROI behind this. And I started asking a lot more of those questions. And then I also encourage the engineers to do the same, right? And my message was always, your time is valuable and you have limited amounts of it. And so we have to be wise in the bets that we're making. And so if you don't understand the value of what you're doing and no one has explained that to you, just ask, why are we doing this? Give me some metrics, right? And if you can't make a good case for why we should be doing this, then we're doing something wrong, right? And again, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Sometimes it's just, this is our biggest customer and they want it, so therefore we're doing it. And that is totally an acceptable answer. In other cases, this is a compliance standard that we have to do, right? Like in the healthcare space, high trust. High trust is fairly frustrating because it is still fixated on principles that were valid in like 2005 and don't make much sense in more of a SaaS cloud world. And you answer these questions, you're like, this makes no sense at all. Why are we still doing this? But again, you got to get the certification that says you are high trust. And then we've had a fair amount of those during my career. Like we had a lot of those. Like in Cornerstone, we had FedRAMP, which is a standard that the federal government puts out. Very, very complicated, very time consuming. But if you want to do business, the federal government, you just got to do it, right? But then there's other cases where there's no data to justify why you're doing something. And then you just have to wonder, okay, should we even be doing this? Like, doesn't feel like it's worth the time, right? Like I get so many requests to automate things. And usually it's just like, hey, can you automate this? And then first question, okay, why do you want to automate this? What are you doing? How often does this happen? And in certain cases, it's like, oh, we had like 5 cases of this in the last month. I'm like, wait a second. That is not worth automating. That's all you saw. Yes, I understand that maybe the work is tedious, but there's so many other important things. And if it only happens 5 times in a month, we should not be doing it.
And that's interesting, because sharing the why from your perspective then allows you to have a conversation around the why, So it's a really important topic. I think why it reminds me of Simon Sinek's TED talk, the famous one with the really bad audio on this, one of the best talks ever. And it's got, but the why I think is really important. So thank you for sharing that. It's a great thing to look back at, leaders out there, and people working, just generally in space of part teams, ask the why, just throw it in there. I think it's a great one. So Ravin, it's been great having you on CTO Confessions. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.